Hello everyone and welcome back. So if you saw the thumbnail and read the title of this video, you'll know exactly what we're talking about today. Which is the fact that I bought an entire old window shop's worth of machinery. Somewhere around 26,000 pounds of iron, give or take, probably a little bit more than that. But briefly, before we get in and see the machines, there's a few concepts I need you guys to understand, or else none of what I'm gonna say in the next 20-ish minutes is gonna make any sense. The one main concept I want you guys to understand is what a mortise and tenon joinery system looks like. Here's a decent little representation of a mortise and tenon. Basically, it's fairly simple. It's square peg, square hole, put them together, assemble them with either glue, or they're being tight fitted, or with wedges, or pinning it with a dowel rod. So basically there's a bunch of different ways to assemble this type of joinery, but it is one of the basic building blocks of how any of this stuff in my house is put together. Every single window, every single door, everything was built with mortise and tenon. So now that we all have a at least basic layman's understanding of what that type of joinery system is, a lot more of these machines will make a lot more sense to you guys. So let's head over to my storage unit where things are really compacted together to make all of this heavy iron fit together in a way that's at least somewhat space efficient. So let's head over there and have a look. Welcome to my magical storage unit. It has so many treasures inside. So let's have a look, shall we? Currently there are 10 machines in here, including 2 Holland Browns and a bunch of various other manufacturers who all made stuff that essentially Holland Brown made as well. So I'm gonna do my best to try to tell all of you guys exactly what each piece is in here and what it does in the most layman terms possible. So let's start here at the front, shall we? First up, we have a Sydney famous chain mortiser. Now a chain mortiser, as you can see by the chain on this machine, is essentially a mini chainsaw that allows you to make mortises. This will cut your square hole for your square peg to go into. And it's a rather nifty time-saving device here. Also with some really beautiful castings, you know, they'll run the chain slack. Usually somebody would just slap a sticker on that, they wouldn't bother with that. And you can see here on the side, the castings of the word famous. And then the Sydney machine go. Absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. This is one of, I think, only 2 machines in here that actually never ran line shafts, so never ran the big, large belts. This actually, you can see right through here, has a direct drive motor, so this one always ran off of a motor. I assume this is probably from about the teens, late teens, maybe 20s. Could potentially be a little bit later. One thing to notice as we go through all the machines that you're gonna notice about all of them is they all have this Badger Packard machine code logo on them. It's because they were all distributed through this company. So these guys didn't make the machines, but they distributed them. So you'll see this even on the Holland Browns. Moving to the left of the Sydney, we have an American relisher and hollow chisel mortiser. So again, it does the same job as the chain mortiser, but has a different way of doing it. So this is the hollow chisel. So essentially there is a drill bit inside of this mortiser. So essentially it drills out the center and you clean up and make a square edge with the chisel portion of it. So this makes a really cool mortise. And I have a lot of these back at the house, so I have lots of various sizes. I probably have every size I'll ever need, so pretty incredible to have this tool. It's also a lot less scary than the chain mortiser. This one's a pretty civilized sounding tool. And of course you drive it forward with the pedal down here. So if I were to press the pedal, you see the table comes forward, which is pretty nifty. Feels maybe a tad bit stiff. It probably needs a little bit of oil, but I mean, again, this all works beautifully. And this side is the relisher. Essentially, when you're putting windows together, there's usually a little bit left over that bind when you're trying to set them all together, and this eliminates that factor. It's really difficult for me to explain exactly the relishing thing because until about 2 weeks ago, I didn't actually know what this meant. And I'm still at the very beginning stages of figuring out exactly what that means. But of course, as I get this installed and this working, I will certainly show you exactly what it does. Now, from what I've heard, these machines, these relishers as they're called, are exceedingly rare. I've already been asked multiple times if I'd be willing to part with it. Of course I'm not. Basically, this machine is just a huge time saver, and people who make historic windows really want them, and there's not a lot of them out there still. So, amazing find, glad to have one. Now to the right of the Sydney, we have an American bracket sander. Now this tool, which you can't see very much of because the arm's going out that way, is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I've seen them in the catalogs for Hall & Brown. Obviously this isn't Hall & Brown, this is the American equivalent, but I never thought I would see one in the wild. So as you see, it has this big bracketed arm that comes off of it. And if you can see down there just at the end is essentially like a modern day orbital sander. So it's a sanding pad that just spins. But this is all completely belt driven. So when I spin this pulley here, you can see all of the belts move, which in turn spins and rotates the bit of sandpaper at the end. So from the other angle, you can actually see the entire bracketed arm that hangs off. And that underside right there, you can see the handles. This is how you would control this machine. And under there would be the sandpaper. You know, it's an amazing thing to find any of this equipment, but to find it in this condition is truly, truly remarkable. Now, this machine by itself is a pretty nice thing to have, but one thing it will not do is it will not raise and lower itself, which is exactly where this machine right here comes into play. Now, this is just a table, but it is an adjustable table. And I don't have the tabletop on it, but this table right here also has little slats in the table that allow for dust collection. So this is a Rowley Hermance, which later did become a part of American dust collection table. It's specifically for sanding. And since, again, the sander cannot go up and down, the table actually comes up and down. And that's what this little lever is right here. You can press that and you can crank it up to different levels. Now the one huge advantage that this combo with the sander and this beautiful table right here have is the fact that when you're sanding with a palm sander or an orbital, sometimes you'll end up sanding one area more than another, resulting in not a perfectly flat finish. With this system, because the sander cannot go up and down, you have no choice. It will be perfectly flat to the table. So it might be really hard to see, but this is the manufacturer here at the bottom, and you can see that crank arm level. And these are all the adjustment points for this table. So right now it's cranked quite low, but of course you can turn it up as high as you like. Now between the sanding table and the relisher that we talked about earlier is what's called a tenoner. If we move the little cart here, you can see here that this one was made by H.B. Smith in New Jersey. Now, for those of you who remember me talking about the history of Hall & Brown, both Hall and Brown came from H.B. Smith. Hall was a foreman at this company, H.B. Smith, and Brown was a pattern maker here. They both left this company to come to St. Louis and start Hall & Brown. So this is really cool to find another tie to, of course, the Hall & Brown story. So I am somewhat backwards. This is where you would stand to operate this machine. Essentially, you would put your style here, and this would cut you a tenon. The one thing that I think, again, that is so amazing about all these machines is not only do they all work, but you can see they all come with all of their original tooling. These are the things that get lost over the years. And here it is. This is the original handle, and because it's detachable, those things always disappear. None of the machines I own have anything like that. So moving from one tenoner to another, this one is another Sydney famous machine. But one difference with this tenoner versus the one we just looked at is the fact that this one is what's called direct drive, meaning these motors directly spin these parts. So you see a motor there, two motors here, one there, and two here, which spin the two wheels here and here. So again, that makes this here a much later machine. And you can see here with all the various switches that you can actually turn each motor on and off, which is pretty amazing. And again, I would assume this is probably from either the very late teens, early 20s, up to 30s, maybe even 40s. So this isn't the oldest machine. I think 40s is starting to kind of stretch it out a bit as far as actual timeline for this. But again, pretty amazing piece of machinery. Now with the last tenoner, just like the last tenoner, it does have a cart in the track that goes there. Those pieces are actually right here. We took those off actually in here because we needed to fit all of this machinery in here. And as you can see, there's a lot of it. So we're just trying to make the most of the room. Again, we have 10 machines in here. And none of them are small, so we're trying to make them fit any way we can. So just behind the tenoner we were just looking at is the first of the 2 clamp tables I have. This one is more for doors. The other one is more for windows or sashes. You can see also that this is another Rowley Hermance. One thing about this machine that I find absolutely incredible is there's still quite a bit of the gold pinstriping and the gold filigree all over this machine, which I think makes this and one other one that is very similar to this in here probably the 2 oldest machines in here. It definitely gives it that almost Wild Westy sort of appearance to it. And yes, I would say that this is probably 1880s or earlier. But what this table does, forgive me, there's a lot of stuff, of course, stacked on it. Again, using as much space in here as possible. There's a rail here, and there's a rail here. And you can see these blocks kind of sitting on here. These are the parts where you can clamp from. And essentially you would lay out your door, fix these 2 rails into place for how wide your door is. And if we come down here to the floor, you can see a pedal. So essentially you get everything pretty close to where you wanted it, put your door in there with your glue up or whatever else, and you would compress the door with that. And that pedal here on the floor would take it that last little bit to perfectly tighten, get all the seams together. And you could do it all at once. And with the adjustability of these clamps, I mean, they slide, they move, they can go on and off. You can put the pressure exactly where you want the pressure when you apply the clamping force. And not only are there these types, but these little ones go up and down and slide on here as well. And again, I keep talking about it, but the preservation and all this, that is bare metal, and it is perfectly flat. There's almost no pitting on this machine whatsoever, or really any of these machines. Almost all of these machines are over 100 years old, and they are in perfect condition. You know, these have never been wanting for oil or grease or any of the things I need to make them run forever. Of course, I guess there's no running with this one. This one doesn't have a motor, just like none of the tables do. But again, if I get low here, you can see that really beautiful paintwork, and you can see the pinstriping and just kind of what it was back in the day and how beautiful it truly was. That might be something I do try to touch up at some point, just because I find it so incredible that it's still there. Coming down from the clamp table, this is the 3rd and final tenoner I have here. This is another Rowley Hermance. And it must come from the same era as the clamp table here, because it has the same gold paint and filigree all over the legs. So again, I imagine this is probably a fairly early machine. And because there are dust collectors and stuff on some of these machines, it might be hard to see some of the things. But since this one's a bit more accessible, again down there's the Rowley Hermance, you can see that this whole table here rolls. And all of the tenoners do the same action, but the other ones are quite tough to get to. Here you can see one of the blades, and here's the upper blade. It's kind of sheathed in this guy here. But essentially, you'd put the part of your window that you're wanting to tenon, or your door, or whatever else, onto this sled here. And you would essentially start it from this position and use this kind of as a clamp to clamp down your board, hold on to it, and then push it through the machine, through the blades. Then when it's perfectly cut and done, you bring it on back, pull up on your handle, remove your board. So a rather ingenious and absolutely beautiful, beautiful machine. And again, unlike on the Sydney, you can see the amount of belts and all the pulleys and stuff they had to make these ones that were belt driven work. Of course, on the Sydney with the direct drive, none of this stuff exists. And again, just showing you the feet of this machine and how absolutely gorgeous they made everything back in the day. I mean, you can just tell that they had so much pride in what they were manufacturing because, you know, why would you apply this level of art to something that was just, you know, a tool? But when you went into a factory and you knew you were dealing with something that was state of the art and amazing when they did things like this, especially at this time period. So that is all of the machines in here except for what are the two that made me go to Wisconsin in the first place. The two that are obviously, to my story and the house's story, the most important. So let's talk about those two, shall we? So what we have here is another clamp table. This is a sash clamp table. This one is in fact a Hall & Brown, a number 136 to be exact. What's really cool about this one is that this one's actually a slightly later model of Hall & Brown, and they're using their eagle holding a cutter head logo. And you can see there's a whole cog around the eagle. Here's an example of it from the catalog. But that's really cool. I've never seen that sticker in the wild. But essentially this works very similarly to the other clamp table. So you can see these 4 spots all around the table. This bar here, this whole bar slides on top of these 2 rails here. So essentially what you would do is you would have the window here. You would use the 2 handles here, or the 2 that are currently removed on this side, which has a little screw through here, which essentially will tighten these, or will bring these guys either forward or more further apart. So you can adjust that. Once you have it more or less in place, you step on that pedal over there and it will clamp down on the table, bringing in that last little bit to get you a good solid clamp, just like the other table, but this pulls from 4 directions as opposed to the other one which only pulls from the 2 directions. And again, you can adjust if you have a curved window or something like that. These all move. So it's a pretty brilliant little piece of kit. And again, can't wait to make windows on something that is a piece of Mr. Brown's legacy. So I have saved the absolute best for last. This is a Hall & Brown number 130 molder. Now this is why I knew I had to go to Wisconsin no matter what. All of that millwork that you guys have seen for the Mansard roof that's been replicated for my house was done on a nearly identical Hall & Brown 130. Eric, my store carpenter, has one of these machines. It's the machine that's already rebuilding my house. Now that I have one, it means that I have an entire library of blades to work with. It means I can cut all of my own moldings for the house. It means I can reproduce just about everything in the house, all of the millwork, all of that. And of course, this model of the 130, which is referred to more as a sash sticker, again, sash being the individual windows. So there's nifty little things here that are specifically for windows. Like when you want to go ahead and cut a groove for the chain or the rope that the window goes into. Well, here's your blade for that right there. And this spins, so you would come it up. And you might also notice a circle here. Well, there's a pedal down here that corresponds with it. And when I press that pedal, up comes a drill bit. Now again, this is on wood right now, so it's not going to let me go up all the way. But essentially this bit here would cut that little circle that those springs go into that stop the chain from pulling out of your window. This thing is so gorgeous in such amazing shape, and I've of course seen one of these run because I've watched Eric make some of my millwork with it. But now I've been to the backside, which I fortunately can't get to at the moment to show you guys, but just the brilliance of it. Like, I never knew how the on and off worked. I knew this was how you turned it on. But what was that doing to make it come on, that handle? This handle here, when you crank it back, you're actually pulling another pulley into this mix, which is tightening that belt and making it turn those wheels. All the feathering boards and the feed rollers here. And then you get to the business end of it, which is behind this really hefty shield, as you would like it to be. But if I pull that up, You can see the head there. Now again, this isn't a very big head and it's obviously very modern, but we'll get into the heads here in a bit. I have quite a few cutter heads. Let's go ahead and put that back down. You can see also there's another cutter head here at the back. So it means you can do upper and lower millwork all at once. So you can cut two sides of the board at the same time. These are all feathering boards and upstops, so the board cannot come up or push out this way with the addition of these items here. And again, this is the machine that had me most absolutely stunned to be up there, because this gives me more capability than you guys can imagine. This is tongue and groove flooring, this is beadboard, this is any type of millwork you can imagine. This is how Victorian houses were built. These machines are the things that did it. This one is definitely the true winner in my eyes for what I was able to find. I mean, even the original ruler here, like the gauge mark, you know, everything's here. This is stuff that not even, these are the kind of things on this machine that not even Eric has. But there you can see the Holland Brown Woodworking Machine Co. here at the bottom, a number 130. And again, the Badger Packard Machine Co. logo there. So the way I came across this entire deal of all this machinery was from my good buddy slash guy who is helping me restore and mill all of the amazing woodwork that goes up on the Mansard roof, Eric. He had discovered this lady in Wisconsin who was selling off a rather large amount of equipment. And wasn't doing so on Facebook Marketplace or anything else like that, but was actually hitting up the old woodworking machine forums, trying to find someone who is truly interested in this stuff. So I immediately sent her a message and we worked out a deal, and I headed to Wisconsin, 10.5 hours each way. Now, when I arrived, I learned more about the story of why these machines exist where they do, and why they were in the possession of this really, really wonderful woman. Mary's husband absolutely loved these machines. He was an engineer, he was heavily into steam, and they actually built their house with these machines. They're the second owners of these machines, and I am now the third owner. Unfortunately and tragically, Mary's husband passed away very unexpectedly this year. And because this was her husband's passion, she wanted these machines to go to somebody who was also super passionate about these. Her main thing was that the collection should, at least as best as possible, stay together and be utilized and used again. And so we set a deal. I essentially paid scrap prices for these machines. So for everything you guys saw over at the storage unit and everything you guys are about to see, plus 4 machines that are still in Wisconsin I have to go get, I paid a grand total of $2,000. And with everything in such beautiful, well taken care of, perfectly preserved, working, functional condition, it's unheard of. Of course, with guys like Eric, who only works on old machinery, and other friends of mine like Jim, who's a few hours away from me, who only works on old machinery, they've both had been in my ear during this entire deal, telling me that if I don't get every single little bit of what's up there, I would be an absolute fool, because this deal will never come around in my life again. And so I took that to heart. I mean, this entire package is going to go so far to not only extend the ability of what I can do, but to extend the ability of a lot of other people around me, and really, really save a lot of our beautiful architecture here in St. Louis. Now, of course, that $2,000 was only actually supposed to be for the machinery itself. So right before I go ahead and show you guys just a brief little tiny piece of some of this tooling that I've acquired for these machines, Mary came up to me as we were trying to load the last few machines on the last trip and told me this story of this old miner who gave her a gold coin when she was a child. This old miner told her that he was giving her this coin because he saw potential in her and wanted to pay something forward to her just to help her along her way. Immediately after she told me this story, she told me that the tooling was mine for free. Now again, this takes a lifetime to collect these things. And individually they can be sold for quite a bit of money. They're worth more in many respects than the machines themselves. But she said, just like that old miner had saw potential in her, she saw potential in me. And this is her way to pay that gold coin forward. It probably is one of the nicest things I've ever had done to me by an individual who was a stranger just a few weeks ago. But I have to say, I have so much respect for what her and her husband did in preserving these machines and making sure they didn't end up in the scrapyard like most all of them did. And then to give me such a gift of all of this is remarkable. And it just shows you the character of how wonderful, wonderful, wonderful this lady is. So without further ado, let me show you my gold coin. So let's go through this somewhat quickly because there is so much to get through. And again, this is probably a 16th of what I actually have. And not everything's actually back in Missouri quite yet. But leather belts. These are all leather belts and they go all the way back. Some of them are huge. This entire box is all leather. And of course, leather belts are what these machines ran off of. And to get this much leather new today, exceedingly expensive. I mean, think about how much just a genuine leather belt is today that you would hold your pants up with. And now consider how much material or how many belts you can make with something like this. This giant belt here. And there's a bunch of these giant belts. It's absolutely insane. Moving up from here, we have a smattering of various heads. These are tenoner heads. I believe these are as well. This here, and I believe this here are both molder heads. So these are what would go on the Holland Brown that you would use to make millwork. Of course, everything's adjustable and you can add multiple heads to come up with different varied profiles. And actually in the Holland Brown catalogs, I've seen heads that look extremely similar to this guy here for about $28 in 1904, which in today's money is about $900. So think about the group I have here and the value. This would have cost this mill back in the day a small fortune to have the tooling to make this woodwork. And then, you know, they just did things that I feel are almost unnecessary. Like these two here, solid brass. I mean, this thing is heavy. And of course, this is solid steel. Right here is a really interesting thing. This is to actually put holes in your window frame to hang your pulleys. So you can have the weight on your windows to open and close them extremely easily. And so it's just a three-headed bit, essentially, that would drill a hole so you can install your sash. Made by the Grand Rapids Sash Pulley Co. So really interesting. Of course, I can't do much of anything with this unless I found Grand Rapids sash pulleys. And then again, I have all of my pulleys from my windows. But still, an amazing little piece of kit here. If anybody finds Grand Rapids pulleys, let me know, because it'd be really interesting to try to install one. Especially now that I have the tooling. We have some various mortises here. These are, again, those hollow chisel. You can see the drill bit inside the square mortise. So again, think about this as kind of a square chisel. You know, it just, you know, pushes through the wood. The center takes out the majority of the wood, and the sides just clean up the edges. And of course, I don't have just 3 sizes. I have an entire thing full of them, along with various other bits. Essentially, I don't think I'm missing any of the common sizes to make sashes or doors. So really crazy, this set here. More of what I believe is called Scheimer heads. At least they were manufactured by Scheimer. And these are spare blades. You can see the blades here and here. They kind of look like seashells slightly, especially on this side. And if you look at the profile here, you can actually see the profile that'd be left in your window or your door. Not unlike many of the profiles of the windows here. I have quite a few of these, and supposedly these last for almost ever. Something like 10,000 board feet of lumber or something like that. I don't know. That's what Eric tells me. Big box of square head screws. So you can see the big square head on them. You wouldn't think this would be an exciting find, but there's many of these that are missing on some of my other machinery. An entire smattering of just tooling for the tenoner. Or tenoners, because I have 3 of them. This box here is dedicated solely to parts for the sander. So this is one of the sander's heads. So you can see it's just a block of wood with a little felt pad, and your sandpaper would go just in front of the felt pad here. And again, I have 4 or 5 of these, so I have replacements if I ever need them. And again, I have the original tool for it. This is the red. This fits every bolt on that machine. Now, of course, one is broken here, but then again, that sander's probably 140 years old. That's not that big of a deal. I'll figure that one out. And I think one of the craziest things that I found with this is a cutter head, just so you can get the correct circumference of the sandpaper. So you see this little pivot point here, and this is a little cutting disc. And this is how you can cut your sandpaper in a perfectly round shape to fit on the sander. Incredible. It's incredible to find the machine in all, any of these machines. But to find all of this with it is unheard of. People search their whole lives to find goofy little things like this. Most all the time they have to make them themselves. No, this was sold with the machine when it was originally sold, again, about 140 years ago. And again, as I said, all of this is tooling. All of these are cutter heads. All of these are clamps. And I mean, even these sticks here, yeah, they might look like scrap wood. They were saved. They were brought back. These are the depth gauges for the sander, so you know how far you're sanding. People search their entire lives for these things. And I somehow ended up with it. It's just incredible. I cannot emphasize to you guys how almost impossible it is to find anything like this. For instance, my buddy Eric, who has a lot of these machines, I've heard stories of him going to mills that are long since closed, buying them from the original mills, but having to go down and dig them out of the basement as the floors around them have collapsed and these machines have fallen from the second story all the way down to the basement. And then you figure out the crazy way of moving 2,000 and 3,000 pound things out of a crumbling, falling apart building. It's wild. And here I come finding this amazing deal. And it not only has me excited, it has Eric, it has all these people that I know in this old machine space extremely excited. And then there's the crazy part, the fact that they actually documented where these machines were originally. This is the building they came out of in 2002 when they bought it. This is where these machines have been all of their existence. And you can see, here's the Hall & Brown number 130 sitting in its original position. There's its mark up there. You can read the Hall & Brown. Here's how a lot of the tooling was set up. All the little cabinets that the workers hand built to handle all of the tooling. These are all mortises here, all mortise chisels. You can see this is the sanding table, all set up. You can see the big bracket arm here and the wonderful table. Again, you guys just saw the base. This is still in the back of my dad's van. I need to bring it out of there. And then all of the millwork set up, all to make windows. And one of the windows they made in the shop with these tools. And then along with Mary, this is a photo of a guy I have some big shoes to look up to. That's Mary's late husband, inspecting all the machines and getting them ready for transport. And of course, again, not even that extensive. These are all photos they shot in 2002 when they did these. These are the actual photos. They're not reprints or anything. They're all labeled 2002. Mary in Wisconsin didn't just sell me a machine shop. She didn't just sell me these machines. She sold me a legacy. She sold me a story. She sold me a history. A history that I am so intrigued by and so thankful to her and her husband for preserving all this stuff. You know, many of these machines didn't survive World War II. Many of these things were melted down to build Liberty ships, to build all of these different things that needed for the war. So many of these things didn't survive. And not only these things make it to the present day, they made it to the present day with everything intact. It's just unheard of. And so I'd like to thank the mill for selling it to these wonderful, wonderful people. And I'd like to thank Mary and her late husband for giving me this opportunity. I mean, you guys have to think for a second. How many Victorian houses get truly restored? Probably like, I don't know, 1 in 10, 1 in 100, somewhere in that range. Okay, well, how many of them get restored with antique machinery? Okay, well, that's a much smaller number. 1 in 5 or 6,000 maybe. Now, how many Victorian houses get restored with their original owner's Victorian machinery? I would say that is an exceedingly small number. And how amazing is it that I get this ultra rare opportunity to do things this way? I don't know, it almost gives me goosebumps. I get to put his house back together with his stuff. And even if it's not all necessarily Holland Brown, it's all of era. And then how many more houses do I get to save beyond that with this stuff? I mean, talk about pushing a legacy. I get to put Mr. Brown far into the future. And so, I don't know, guys. I get really nerdy and geeky about this stuff, but I think it is so very cool to know how these people built these things, to know how it all worked, to know and understand this all is, I just think it's such an amazing opportunity, an amazing find. And I don't know, I'm almost lost for words about how exciting this is. So that'll do it for this little jaunt episode. Definitely expect more things to be happening with these machines in the very near future as I rush to get a shop together. Again, this greatly increases the capability of what I can actually do here and how quickly I can accomplish these things. And I foresee a lot less wood filling in my future for some reason. I do really want to thank a few people really quickly for making this all possible. Of course, Eric and his daughter Claire, who let me know about the sale and went up one of the trips with me to Wisconsin to retrieve some of this stuff. My grandfather, who agreed to drive a 26-foot U-Haul back for me. Grandpa, thank you. It was an amazing road trip and I had a blast with you. To Mary and her husband, who curated the most amazing collection of machines I think I've ever seen, and preserved not only the machines but the history and the stories of them, which I will share more and more with you guys as I comb through this collection and figure out exactly what I even own. And then I think the last thank you is definitely a very well-deserved one as well, and that's to you guys. I don't know if you guys actually fully understand how you all have changed the trajectory of my life. How deep I've been able to get into this building because of the knowledge you guys have shared with me, because of the feedback, because of the questions, and just really because of the outpouring of love you guys give me every week. Trying to save this beautiful old girl and trying to do it in the best way possible. So I want to thank you guys all from the bottom of my heart. You really do all play such a huge part in the story of this house. And so for that, I'm forever in your debt. So I will see you guys all again very soon. Thanks again for watching. And yeah, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.